In the heart of West Africa lies Burkina Faso, a nation often overlooked on the world stage. Yet today it has captured global attention. In 2025, a controversial proposal from the United States, a $50 million migration plan crafted under former President Donald Trump's administration, was met with an unexpected but resounding response. The plan, aimed at regulating migration flows, would see funds distributed to select African countries to help manage migration. On paper, it promised economic support and border security. But on the ground, the reaction was far from supportive. Cut 2. Close-up of Captain Ibrahim Traoré walking through a bustling street, greeted by citizens, shaking hands with calm, inspiring music in the background. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's young and visionary leader, spoke plainly yet forcefully. In a statement that reverberated across continents, he declared, "Africa is not a landfill." These 4 words carried the weight of history, dignity and self-respect. They reminded the world that Africa will not be treated as a dumping ground for policies that undermine its sovereignty. Insert dramatic montage, archival footage of African independence movements, protests against colonial rule, and images of modern African cities rising. But what exactly was in this $50 million plan? Why did it spark such controversy? And who is the man who refused it on behalf of millions of Africans? Today, we unravel the story behind Burkina Faso's decision, exploring the historical context, the geopolitics at play, and the wider implications for Africa and the world. In early 2025, the Trump administration unveiled what it described as a strategy to manage migration and strengthen security across Africa. The plan proposed $50 million in funding to assist governments in monitoring borders, establishing migration protocols, and offering incentives to reduce illegal migration. U.S. officials emphasized the humanitarian aspect, suggesting the funds would help improve economic conditions to stem the flow of people seeking better opportunities abroad. Overlay, animated maps showing migration routes from West Africa to Europe and the United States. Yet critics immediately raised concerns. The plan, they argued, reflected a paternalistic attitude, implying that African countries could not manage migration on their own. Many saw it as a subtle continuation of neo-colonial influence, a way to dictate African policies under the guise of assistance. It's not just about $50 million. It's about control and narrative. For decades, African nations have received aid with strings attached. This plan could easily be seen in the same light. The controversy wasn't confined to academics. Across social media, news outlets, and African capitals, debates raged about the ethics, purpose, and implications of Trump's proposal. And in the middle of this debate, Burkina Faso took a decisive stand. In a move that stunned both allies and critics, Burkina Faso outright rejected the $50 million plan. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, addressing his nation from the presidential office, spoke with clarity and conviction. Traoré, Africa is not a landfill. We will not allow foreign policies to dictate our decisions or treat our people as objects in someone else's agenda. The statement resonated far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. It was a bold assertion of sovereignty, a moral stand, and a challenge to the global status quo. While some questioned whether rejecting the funds might hinder economic growth or development projects, Traoré's message was unambiguous. Dignity and independence come first. "We support our leader. Burkina Faso must stand tall and proud," says a young teacher in Ouagadougou. "Foreign aid should help, not control," adds a local shopkeeper. This was more than politics. It was a declaration that Africa has the right to chart its own course, free from undue influence or coercion. To understand why Burkina Faso's leader rejected a $50 million offer from a former U.S. president, we must first understand the man behind the decision, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Born in a small village in Burkina Faso, Traoré rose through the ranks of the military with a reputation for courage, intelligence, and a deep commitment to his country. Unlike many leaders who rely solely on political advisors or external counsel, Traoré has consistently emphasized direct engagement with his citizens, walking through markets, visiting schools, and listening to the concerns of everyday Burkinabe. His leadership style combines pragmatism with principle. He is known for making difficult decisions that prioritize national sovereignty over convenience. Rejecting Trump's migration plan is not an impulsive act. It reflects decades of political philosophy shaped by history, resistance, and the ongoing struggle for African self-determination. Cut to archival footage. Protests against foreign interference in Africa, independence movements of the 20th century, and previous Burkinabe leaders championing Pan-African ideals. Traoré embodies a new generation of African leadership, young, assertive, and unapologetically committed to the dignity of the continent. While he understands the importance of international cooperation, he refuses to compromise sovereignty for short-term gains. In his own words, "Africa must lead its own destiny. We cannot allow history to repeat itself. Our decisions must reflect our values, not foreign interests." This vision extends beyond politics. Traoré sees Africa as a continent of potential, innovation, and resilience, capable of solving its own challenges while engaging with the world on equal footing. Rejecting Trump's migration plan was a logical extension of this philosophy, sending a clear signal: Africa will define its own path. Critics might label Traoré's stance as defiance, but supporters see it as leadership rooted in principle. His message resonates not only within Burkina Faso, but across Africa, inspiring nations to prioritize dignity, self-reliance, and sovereignty over expedient foreign aid. With this understanding of Traoré's leadership and principles, we can better grasp the significance of Burkina Faso's rejection of the $50 million plan and what it means for Africa and the world. To understand Burkina Faso's decision, we need to explore the layers behind it: political, economic, and historical. Refusing $50 million is more than a financial choice. It is a statement about sovereignty, self-respect, and Africa's role in global politics. At first glance, $50 million may seem like a substantial amount for a developing nation. But Burkina Faso, like many African countries, sees beyond the immediate sum. Accepting funds with strings attached could create dependencies and influence future policy decisions. For Traoré, economic independence is a cornerstone of national pride. Rejecting the money emphasizes that African nations can pursue their own development strategies without being swayed by external pressure or conditional aid. Politics is about power, and sovereignty is about control over your own decisions. Accepting foreign aid with implied expectations could compromise that power. Traoré's firm refusal sends a message: Burkina Faso will determine its policies, priorities, and partnerships independently. Africa's history with Western powers is complex and often painful. Colonial exploitation, resource extraction, and conditional aid have left lasting scars. For many African leaders, accepting external funding that could dictate internal policies evokes memories of subjugation and external control. Traoré, fully aware of this history, chose to reject any action that might compromise dignity or repeat past patterns of dependency. Traoré's decision also positions Burkina Faso as a moral and political leader on the African continent. By rejecting the plan, he sets an example for other nations, a call to lead with principle, assert independence, and demand respect in global negotiations. This leadership is not just symbolic, it has tangible effects. By taking a stand, Burkina Faso influences regional discussions, encourages debate among policymakers, and inspires a new generation of African leaders who value dignity over expedience. Understanding these factors, economic independence, political sovereignty, historical context, and Pan-African leadership, gives us a clearer picture of why Burkina Faso said no. But how did the world react? And what does this mean for the global political landscape? To answer that, we turn to Scene 6, Global Reactions, where the eyes of the world focused on Burkina Faso and Traoré's bold stand. Burkina Faso's bold rejection of Trump's $50 million migration plan sent ripples across the globe. International media scrambled to cover the story, and within hours, social media exploded. Headlines ranged from admiration to skepticism, reflecting the polarized views on sovereignty, foreign aid, and global responsibility. News channels highlighted the unprecedented nature of Traoré's decision. Many praised the young leader for his courage and clarity, framing him as a symbol of Africa's growing assertiveness on the world stage. For the African continent, this was a moment of pride and inspiration, a reminder that the era of unquestioned foreign influence is being challenged. Social media played an equally powerful role. Within hours, the hashtag Africa is not a landfill began trending across platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Citizens, activists, and influencers used it to amplify discussions on sovereignty, dignity, and Africa's role in global politics. Africa is not a dumping ground for foreign agendas. Thank you, Burkina Faso, for showing the world what leadership looks like. This is a new chapter in African sovereignty. Traoré reminds us that dignity cannot be bought. Western nations are assessing the implications for aid and diplomacy, while African audiences largely celebrate the assertion of independence and leadership. Some critics argued that rejecting the $50 million could hinder Burkina Faso's access to economic support, potentially affecting infrastructure and development programs. However, supporters countered that integrity and self-determination outweigh short-term financial gain. The reactions were not limited to media or social platforms. Governments, policymakers, and international organizations took notice. Analysts suggest that Traoré's refusal may influence other African nations to reassess foreign aid proposals, demanding agreements that are equitable and respect sovereignty. In essence, Burkina Faso's stand became a global conversation starter, challenging norms of international aid, diplomacy, and power. Traoré's words, simple yet profound, reverberated far beyond Ouagadougou. Africa is not a landfill. Captain Traoré's rejection of the $50 million migration plan is more than a single political decision. It carries broader implications for Africa, global politics, and the ongoing discourse on migration and foreign aid. By saying no, Burkina Faso challenges the traditional global power dynamic, where Western nations often dictate terms to developing countries. This act reasserts that African nations have agency, can set their own priorities, and will engage with the world on equal footing. Traoré's stance is a reminder that sovereignty cannot be compromised, even in a world dominated by economic and political superpowers. Traoré's decision also serves as a model for Pan-African leadership. It signals to other nations that asserting independence and defending dignity is not only possible, but essential. Across the continent, leaders, policymakers, and citizens are re-examining the conditions under which foreign aid is accepted, emphasizing respect, mutual benefit, and African-led initiatives. Migration has long been a contentious issue globally. Policies often treat Africa as a source of problems rather than partners in solutions. Traoré's rejection forces a reconsideration of these approaches, emphasizing that migration must be addressed collaboratively, respecting African nations as equal stakeholders rather than passive recipients of foreign directives. Rejecting the $50 million does not mean turning away from progress. On the contrary, it encourages Burkina Faso and other nations to pursue development on their own terms. It demonstrates that financial assistance should be a partnership, not a tool for influence. The moral lesson is clear. Dignity, sovereignty, and ethical governance are more valuable than short-term monetary gain. History adds weight to this moment. Africa has endured centuries of colonialism, exploitation, and conditional aid. Traoré's decision echoes the anti-colonial leaders of the 20th century, signaling that African nations will no longer accept policies that treat them as subordinate. Symbolically, it is a stand for justice, self-respect, and the promise of a new era of African autonomy. To fully understand the significance of Burkina Faso's stance, we must contextualize it within the broader narrative of migration in Africa. Millions of Africans migrate every year due to conflict, economic hardship, and climate change. These movements are complex, and solutions require cooperation, not control. External aid that treats migration as a problem to be managed often overlooks the root causes: lack of opportunity, political instability, and environmental pressures. Traoré's decision underscores the importance of addressing migration from within Africa, empowering nations to create solutions that respect both human dignity and sovereignty. Rather than external dictation, Traoré emphasizes African-led initiatives, community empowerment, and sustainable economic growth, long-term solutions that reduce migration pressures while enhancing stability and opportunity. Burkina Faso's rejection sends a powerful signal to the world. Foreign aid must be grounded in respect and partnership, not influence or control. Sovereignty cannot be bought, and dignity cannot be compromised. Traoré's principled stand challenges policymakers, corporations, and international organizations to rethink how they engage with African nations. For global politics, this is a call to action, to listen, collaborate, and respect African leadership. For citizens worldwide, it is a reminder that nations deserve the freedom to choose their own path, free from undue interference. In rejecting Trump's $50 million migration plan, Burkina Faso has made history. The message is simple, yet profound. Africa is not a landfill. Africa is a continent of dignity, potential, and sovereignty. Captain Ibrahim Traoré reminds the world that leadership requires courage, vision, and unwavering defense of principles. By standing firm, he challenges not only foreign powers, but also inspires an entire continent to reclaim its narrative, assert its voice, and embrace its future. This is more than a story about a nation rejecting funds. It is a story about identity, sovereignty, and the power of principled leadership. As the world watches, Africa speaks, and it will not be ignored. Remember, history is shaped not just by wealth or power, but by courage and conviction. Burkina Faso's stand will be remembered.